Views expressed by Casters Guild members are only the opinions of that member, and that could change from day to day. Guild members may use mature language, but that in no way means they are mature. Listener discretion is advised.
Anne Rice's story about preternatural beings of the night has been told many times in many ways. But what are the differences between the adaptations and what's worth watching? Well, that's the spell we're casting tonight on Casters Guild. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Casters Guild. I am your Guild Master Rick Perry, aka The Merciful Death.
And I am your Guild Master Baron Kane, and I am not getting the reference.
And joining us,
play off it at all.
And joining us are two returning Guild members. Feel free to introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Tiffany, and on AIM, I was Lestat's mistress.
That's amazing.
I believe that.
I'm Caitlin, and I'm the resident film detective here.
And Guildmaster Baron, the reference was that is one of Louis's nicknames in the book series Interview with the Vampire.
They named him the Merciful Death?
Yes.
That's lame.
It was better than the other ones. I looked up several of Louis's nicknames, and I feel like Merciful Death is better than Beautiful One or Dark Angel.
Well, okay, but kind of. I can make arguments, but okay, I'll give it to you.
All right, so what we are doing today here on this episode is we are doing an unofficial sequel to an episode of Caitlin's podcast, Operation Silver Screen. You will find a link to that episode in the description down below. Make sure you go and listen to that one before you listen to this one. And basically what we're going to be doing in this episode specifically is deep diving into the different adaptations of Interview with the Vampire. So I made sure that, Tiffany, you'd be on this episode because Caitlin might be our resident film detective, but you are definitely our resident Interview with the Vampire expert.
Aw, thanks. Also, thank you for not calling it Interview with a Vampire. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a common mistake. Caitlin covered that in her episode, too.
I know. I think I've gotten it wrong before.
I do it on purpose.
We know.
All right, so let's start with the easy question. Other than the book, because I feel like the book is too easy of an answer, what is everyone's favorite adaptation been?
That's really hard.
Ooh.
So, it's not Quit of the Damned. Not.
Okay, but that's a hell of a
soundtrack. Yes, soundtrack was phenomenal. Phenomenal soundtrack.
Don't watch the movie. Get the soundtrack. No, you know what? Okay, get the soundtrack. Yeah.
Get the soundtrack. Yes.
Yeah.
Just, you know what? Watch the movie. Don't listen to anything. Just listen to the soundtrack.
Look, they didn't do the actors any justice in that. I think the actors were fine. I think they could have put them in a better movie.
I mean, Aaliyah looks good.
Yes, Aaliyah played Akasha phenomenally. But read the book. But my favorite adaptation, it used to be the movie Interview with the Vampire. I've loved it for years. I watch it every year. I've memorized it. But I'm thoroughly enjoying the series. Really enjoying the AMC series.
Yeah, I know. You've already gotten quite a bit of the merch.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I'm actually have not finished the book. I'm about halfway through it. And I only recently started reading that. So the movie was the first adaptation I saw. And I watched it a long time ago, and I've watched it a couple times since. Like I said, most recently we covered it on my podcast where we talked about the movie and kind of its cultural significance. But I do think for me, the TV show has surpassed the movie as far as I can't really speak to it as an adaptation because I haven't finished the book. And I know that there are a lot of differences between the book and the new adaptation, but just as a storytelling in general and just all the elements that go into it. Yeah, I definitely prefer the series now to the movie, though I still have a place in my heart for the movie.
Absolutely.
I'm going to have to agree. I haven't even finished the series yet, and it's already probably my favorite.
I guess I'll be the odd man out and say I prefer the movie, if nothing more than pacing sake. here's where I'm going to be the evil member of the podcast, because I know my wife will strike me down after this episode is finished. But I have quite a few problems with Anne Rice as an author. Mostly, I feel like the woman needs to be hit over the head with a thesaurus.
That's a big dinosaur.
She tends to pick a word or pick a phrase and kind of reuse it over and over and over again, and kind of hit the same beats over and over and over again. And while I believe this is also a problem that the movie has, I feel like it is amplified in the television show. And with Interview with the Vampire in general, the book, the movie, the series, the phrase, "yeah, I get it," it tends to come up a lot for me.
Mm-hmm.
And understand, our listeners at home, I love the book, I love the movie, I love the series. I'm mostly only doing this because I know other members of this podcast right now are about to sing the praises of Interview with the Vampire, and someone has to be the voice of the other side. And so while these opinions are honest, these are my honest opinions, I will continue to share any negative opinions I have. They're definitely not my strongest opinions. It's just my strongest opinions are going to be shared by other members. So I'm just trying to be a different voice.
Also understand this, because Guildmaster Rick has shared that opinion, I will be inheriting the podcast where it will be where it will experience a slow, painful death. Much like Guildmaster Rick.
Yes, very true. However, I will say, you also have to realize when it comes to authors, a lot of the time when they're writing a series, they do everybody has like their own phrase that they say pretty much over and over. Like I will say, yes, Anne Rice uses preternatural a lot in her series and in her stuff. Like I remember reading that, go, man, she just said that. But it just becomes like their certain flavor. It's kind of the same thing happens with Sarah J. Maas and her ACOTAR series. Like there are phrases that are repeated over and over and over. Yes. It just becomes like their signature to it. And that's what you remember. But yeah, I can agree that is a thing. Maybe a thesaurus, sure, could have helped. But she also wrote these back in like the 70s. So it's totally different time. But yeah, it was that type of thing. Sorry, I got distracted on how I'm going to murder and mutilate later. Sorry. Maybe I'll reread the books to see how they did it.
Also,
get some ideas.
Also, I would like to point out that book was written in the 70s, but it was based off of a short story that was wrote in the 60s.
That is true. Do you know the story's name?
Is it the same thing?
It is not.
Ah, dang it.
It's actually called The Master of Rampling Gate.
That's a cool-ass name!
Isn't it? I have it.
What are the, not spoilers, I guess, for that short story, but what are the similarities?
Definitely still vampire. And it's basically about I'm pretty sure it's a dude who goes into this mansion and meets a vampire. It's very Dracula-esque, but more modern.
Okay.
But there is no...
Yeah, I know a lot of them. Okay. Yeah, I know a lot of the humanizing of vampires really originates from The Vampire by John Polidori, who kind of wrote vampires as like Byronic figures. So I was curious to see it's interesting seeing how that has evolved into what we know of vampires and vampire media today.
Yeah, Anne definitely writes them as very romantic. She romanticizes them. They're not these cruel monsters. They're more humanoids, but with monster tendencies, who are also immortal. Not to be confused with today's humans, but because there are some out there who are the same. But these ones are immortal, and they know it.
It tends to romanticize immortality a lot of the same way that Tolkien's elves kind of do, where it's just like, I've lived a whole lot longer than you, and because of that, like, I am, this just better person. But, it all starts with Interview with the Vampire, whereas, I feel like later books in the series, honestly, is more the romanticization of the immortals, where Louis, in the first one, just kind of tears it down.
He stays like that throughout the whole series, though. Like, he is definitely that preternatural emo kid his whole life. I mean, there are some spoilers in there. Should I do spoilers? Because I've read the whole series.
Yes, we are. Caitlin's podcast has a spoiler section. Our entire podcast is spoilers.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So spoilers later on in the books. Louis does get to the point where he is so depressed with his immortality that he does kill himself. And he does succeed in that. But he is brought back, of course, by Lestat because he is a selfish brat whom we love. And he comes back and he's still very depressed. But her characters are still varied. I just love the way she did them with that. Like, the immortality with Louis is not romanticized. He hates it. He is depressed the whole time. And I feel like Brad Pitt did a really good job in Interview with the Vampire, the movie. I think he is my favorite Louis. Whereas Louis Anderson, not Louis Anderson, I forget his name.
Louis Anderson, yeah.
Louis Anderson.
Louis Anderson.
I know his last name is Anderson. Jacob
Now,
Anderson.
now I can't think of anybody else but Louis Anderson as Louis.
You know what? I would watch that. I would totally watch that. Oh boy, that's a completely different. That might be my favorite adaptation, right there.
The one you just made up.
Yep, I just did that. No, I'm pretty sure it's Jacob Anderson. He does a really good Louis, but it's not the original Louis. But it's still a really good, different version of Louis. I do thoroughly like it. Of course, there's way differences. They had to change his character because that's not the book Louis. There's parts of him that are book Louis, but not Louis from the Interview with the Vampire movie. Brad Pitt was that Louis.
I feel like Jacob Anderson eventually kind of accepts being a vampire, where the book Louis never does.
I agree.
Yeah, I think for me, like watching the movie, something I talked about in my podcast is that I felt like all the cast was giving it their all except for Brad Pitt. I did not like his character. I didn't like the performance he gave. And then when I read the book, I kind of saw that it was more similar to the book.
It's crazy, isn't it?
So, yeah. Whew. So for me, I think that's also why I'm really struggling to get through the first book. I want to kind of push through it so I can read the later books, but it's been a bit of a struggle because I just don't like Louis. And then the TV series came along and I loved Louis. I thought that it was a much more fleshed out character, at least from what's in the first book and what's from the film adaptation. And I think that he's just interesting. I like that it kind of goes into a lot more of his character with his kind of anger and his failings, and also reckoning with this adaptation over the others, just his role as a Black man and kind of how immortality and vampirism sit with his experience as a Black man, and how it's not a solution to any of the things that he was kind of dealing with, and how it was posed to him as a solution to his problems, and then it just kind of makes his problems worse. So I think it makes his grappling with immortality so much more deeper than it was in the other adaptations.
I agree. I really like that version of Louis in the series adaptation. It's definitely more in depth. And I will say the first book, trudge through it, because the first book is only in the POV of Louis. The rest of them are all Lestat. And so the next book is the interview, or nothing, is the Vampire Lestat, and it's basically like him saying, okay, you've heard Louis talk, love him to death, let me tell you how it actually happened. And then from then on, it's all in his POV of the whole story. So trudge through it. Louis does show back up in the books, but all from Lestat's POV, and it's way better.
And that's what I love about the television series too, because I don't think you really got that idea of the frame narrative, of the unreliable narrator, that much in the movie adaptation. But this show just like really tackles it head on. And for me, I'll be honest, I've watched this series like twice now, I think, because I finished it. I finished watching season 2 and I was like, I need to immediately go back and rewatch season 1 and think of it through a different perspective than Luis. Like I had to do that. Like I thought that was necessary for me to really get the full story and kind of grapple with the themes of memory as a monster and all these other things that it really brings up, especially in season 2. And I think it was just a really fulfilling story that way. I think it's excellent writing in that manner.
I agree. I am thoroughly hooked. Like I know what happens, but I'm like, gimme, because it's really good. And the first two
Yeah.
seasons, they're still only in the first book. Like, they haven't even hit. They've hit some of the Vampire Lestat, but it looks like they're getting ready to hit more of Queen of the Damned Vampire Lestat.
Yeah,
They've only done the first book.
They've definitely covered material from some of the other books.
Mm-hmm. They've hinted. They've shown glimpses of it. Like, they're starting to give you hints of this is what's coming type stuff.
I think it's also refreshing just as a TV series that they split it up into 2 seasons, even though they are still pretty short seasons. I really enjoyed the pacing of this. I think the problem with a lot of television shows nowadays on streaming with these shorter seasons is that a lot of writers don't know how to write episodically. So you have these seasons that feel just like really, really long movies. And I think if they had tried to condense everything into one season, that's what we would have gotten. So I really enjoyed the pacing and the way that each episode was kind of individually structured. I thought that was really well done as well.
I agree. That way they were actually to go more in depth with it as well. Like, there's so much that you can put into it.
Mm-hmm. And I don't think you would have ever felt the weight of Claudia as a character if you had condensed it either.
That's true. Like, all the things that she actually, we're seeing what she went through. Whereas in the books, I mean, technically in the book, she's only like 4 or 5 years old. So the fact that they did age her up, it gave them more opportunity to do more things with her.
Yeah.
And love her as a character. Because I'll say, in the book, she is glad she's gone.
Whew, yeah, she was something else.
Uh-huh. But in the TV series, you actually start to like fall in love with her. You're like, oh, she's great. She's a wonderful character. And it's sad to see what happens, and your heart breaks for her.
Yeah, I agree. She's definitely, you can relate to her more, and she just has such richness of her character. But at the same time, she is definitely Lestat's daughter for sure. And I think that's one thing that I wish we gotten a little bit more of is just the relationship between her and Lestat, and kind of showing that a little bit more explicitly, how she is a villain just like everyone in this story, right? She still is a monster, but I don't think that defines her. But I think there is elements of that, but I do wish it would have explored a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. But they did do a lot with her. I like what they did with her.
Yeah, and I also really like just the idea of, with aging her up to 14, the idea that she's constantly in this state of puberty and what that would do to your emotions. I thought that was a really good touch that they added as well.
I agree, because man, that messes you up. As a teenage female, ugh.
So, touching on the fact that you just said, everyone's a villain and everyone's a vampire, everyone's a monster, do you think that in this series, vampires are inherently evil?
To an extent, yes. I mean, you have to be if you want to survive. Like, that just becomes part of the nature. But you can do it in a humane way.
I think for me, it poses the question that evil is relative, because it kind of puts them, the way at least Lestat seems to kind of view it, is that they're above human matter, such as good as evil. And that's why you also have it. You have a lot of this like Catholicism motifs that are brought in, and kind of how Louis uses his Catholic upbringing to kind of view the situation, which is kind of different than what other characters do. So it's relative. So I don't know that I really have a good answer if they're inherently good or evil, because I think that in a way they're above that understanding as vampires. But at the same time, I do think there is questions of morality in there.
One of my favorite quotes from the movie is when there's the scene where Lestat takes Louis into the crypt after they've burnt down the house. And Louis is like, is this hell? Is that where we're at now? And Lestat says, God kills indiscriminately, and so shall we, for no creatures under God are as we are. I feel like that's a really good sense of how vampirism kind of is for them. But at the same time, in the books, it's explained that Lestat in the beginning and Louis in the beginning only killed the evildoer, like the rapists, the thieves, villains of the human world. So I guess it really depends on, as they grow and as they evolve mentally and in the world, what their food is and how they feel about it.
Of course, they also ate slaves, but that's another story.
Yeah.
They did. And I thought that was a really interesting turn in the series, too, because when I first found out that Louis was going to be a male of color, I was like, that's different, because in the books, Louis was a slave owner. And so, this is going to be a very interesting take. But I think they did a really good job with it.
Yeah, I think so, too. I think it's definitely a tricky thing to navigate, but I do think that they did it pretty well.
So, do you think that specifically Louis, and later on even any other vampire, is capable of love, or is it just infatuation?
I think it's both. I think they can absolutely become infatuated with whomever or whatever. And I do feel like they feel love because, well, one, they're also alive for so long that, of course, they're going to fall in love and be in love. But I also think love can hurt more because they're alive for so long that once they lose that love, it's going to stick with them the whole time.
Yeah, I definitely think that they're capable of love, and I think that's also part of where like the idea that this is Gothic literature comes in, because everything is so extreme, and love is extreme, and love can be destructive, but it's still love.
After hearing Louis' story, would you consider being a vampire?
Teenage Tiffany would say yes. Current Tiffany would say no, because man, my back hurts. I am not I am not willing to live forever with this.
I'm assuming if you're a vampire, your back wouldn't hurt.
It depends on the version of vampires that you like. Like I know in Anne Rice's, when you become a vampire, you age back a little bit and you become, perfect and beautiful and things like that. But no, probably not. No.
I definitely consider it. I mean, it has its drawbacks, of course, but immortality doesn't sound too bad, right?
I would say that if there were vampires, there's probably werewolves, and I would hold out for a werewolf. But if it was just vampires and they were the Anne Rice vampires, yes, I would take it, no problem.
I'm kind of in the Louis camp. Immortality is the worst curse you could ever give someone, in my opinion. And
it's not immortality if it can end. I mean,
you're fair enough.
Yeah, I come from the Marvel camp. Ageless is different than immortality, where, immortality would imply that you just can't die, but vampires can die. So
I do guess you have to be careful, because I feel like in Anne Rice's universe, vampires can reach a level of power and a level of age where death does become impossible, or at least next to it. There's several instances where vampires either attempted to kill themselves or others attempted to kill them, and it just didn't fucking work. Louis is an example where it did work, but I think it's just because he punched his checkout card early enough. And another thing about vampires in Anne Rice's universe is I feel like there isn't a whole lot of information shared, and there's a whole lot of information going around where a lot of these vampires are figuring it out for themselves. And I don't think anybody would tell you, hey, make sure if you want to check out that you do it before this age, or it's going to become pretty much impossible. So yeah, I definitely would not be signing up for that particular brand of vampirism.
If we're keeping in the Anne Rice world, it all depends on your bloodline. Like when you read into The Queen of the Damned, there's a part where Akasha kills all the younglings, like the young vampires, and it's all because of the blood. It's so diluted. Like she was, I think she was the second or the third vampire created. No, she was the second. She was the second one created. And so the more the blood gets passed down and diluted and diluted and diluted, it's not as powerful. And so she just instantly snapped her fingers, and all the lower level vampires instantly burst into flames. But yet the ones who were older and more pure of her bloodline, they were able to resist. So I guess it just depends on that too. Like, yeah, the purer the blood and the older the blood, the more likely you're going to live through anything.
Yeah, those 13 gen vampires, they get a lot of flack.
Oh yeah. Got muddy blood.
Mm-hmm.
But whether or not you want to be a vampire, you're still going to have to clothe yourself, whether you're going out or the night or the day. And you know where you can get some sick threads?
Hot Topic?
tvillain.com.
Even better.
T-Villain is a t-shirt site where you'll find a killer limited edition shirt being sold for $13 only while supplies last. Every Monday, the site features a new design by a new artist. We would tell you what's featured right now, but by the time you hear this, it's already changed.
They choose the most ingenious designs that reflect everything evil and villainy, as well as works pertaining to anything artistic, pulp style, lowbrow, pop culture, TV, movies, music, video games,
comics, etc. All things cool and evil, basically. To check them out and help Casters Guild, click our link in the description.
Okay, so in all of the adaptations, are the quote-unquote civilized vampires of Paris all that different from the primitive vampires of Eastern Europe?
Wait, of what? Of Eastern Europe?
Correct.
Am I familiar?
Do you mean like the catfish? Sorry, it's something I can think to call it the catfish. I forget what the actual name of it, but Louis says it looks like a catfish. The monstrosity.
zombified one?
Yeah, is that what you mean?
Yeah, like, okay, so I'm talking like the monstrous vampires and the vampires of the theater before the theater, when they were, still following all the old rules,
Okay.
Anything other than vampires that have embraced modern society.
Yeah, no, I think they have this like appearance that they're liberated, but they're still kind of stuck to these own rules and systems. And so my answer would be no.
I also think it depends on the influence that they're under. For example, the vampires in the theater, they were basically in a cult. They were being told one thing, led one way, and that's how the higher up vampires wanted it. And the ones that were basically zombified, there are some of those vampires in the books, but there's not a lot of those. There's only like 1 or 2 instances. And those are the ones that were just so lost and so destroyed, like mentally and what they ate. It was not good. So yeah, there's some differences. I feel like it all depends mentally on where they are and what they know and who they eat.
Yeah, I don't necessarily have a big opinion on that. I think this is going to be one of those things that kind of slipped by my attention. The different kinds of vampires in this. Like I knew about the theater ones, and I knew about even what I saw didn't even go into big detail in the American vampires. So yeah, I mean, like you think about the movie, and it was Louis and Lestat in like just solitude there for the longest time, and then they went to Paris and met the theater kid vampires, and that was just like a whole new world. So I didn't see a difference there. Like, it's just they have rules now.
For me, I think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. I was just gonna say, whereas before they didn't. But yeah, go ahead.
For me, I think it's interesting that, like, talking about how much season 2 shed light on season 1, you can understand why in season 1, Lestat was all about remaining in solitude and not seeking out other vampires for various reasons, whether it's to protect Claudia from these rules or just from his own experiences with other vampires. And not that he went about it the right way in season 1, but it does add to a lot of different understanding of his motivations.
Okay. Switching gears here into a little bit of speculation. How do you think Louis's character arc changes in each different adaptation if Claudia is never embraced and turned into a vampire?
I think Louis would have thrown himself into the fire way before.
Yeah.
Just way before any of that had happened. I think he would have offed himself, or the first 200 years.
I'm not sure for the other adaptations. I do think that I have mixed feelings about that, because I do think that's right. But on the other hand, I do think that there are certain character developments with Louis that he would have not gone through if it weren't for Claudia. And I think that Claudia and the loss of Claudia was really his rock bottom. And I don't know that he would have ever, I think he would have just stayed with Lestat and stayed in this kind of, it's self-loathing, but I think he's also comfortable with his own self-loathing. And I think he would have just stayed in that like pit for a very long time.
I agree. The Claudia passing was a pivotal moment in his character development, and he definitely gets very comfortable with his melancholy self, and he basically stays that way. Like even later in the books, he's there, but he's not really there. Like he'll come to the gatherings, but he doesn't really involve himself. He's just kind of there. He prefers to be that shadow in the background. But he's still Louis, but he just doesn't engage. He's definitely that melancholy self, and he's comfortable with it. He'd rather be off alone And I feel like that's just who he becomes as an existence because of everything that has happened with Claudia and Louis, or in Claudia and Lestat.
I'm not sure how much does the book grapple with the idea of him finding his own agency, because I think that's definitely where his arc really is in the series, is being able to find that. But I'm not sure how much it really tackles that in the books.
In Interview with the Vampire, it doesn't. Later on, you start to see more of him when Lestat interacts with him. I believe Merrick is the book where he offs himself. Pretty sure it's Merrick. And that Merrick, she plays a really big role in his character development as well. So that book gets a little bit more in depth with him, Louis, and Lestat. Or, dang it, Merrick, Lestat, and Louis. So definitely recommend that one. And Merrick is not part of... she herself is not a big Interview with the Vampire Chronicle vampire. Like, she's from a different line, but she does meet everybody there.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's something that wasn't really tackled in the movie. I think that especially with Armand and the relationship there between him and Armand, that was definitely lacking in the movie for me. And I think I even mentioned in the podcast when I covered it, like the first half of Interview with the Vampire of a movie I really enjoyed, but it does kind of go downhill when it comes to Armand and when he goes into Paris. And I think that's something that the movie really just tried to get through. I think that it's lacking a lot of detail, but I think maybe present in the novel and then the added detail in the series.
Actually, it's the opposite. So in the movies, they do so much with Louis and Armand. In the books, yes, Louis does get with Armand, but there's nothing. We just know that, yes, they spent a couple 100 years together. So the series actually gives you an insight of what they've gone through, their relationship, their struggles, they're happy, they're not. Book, yeah, they're together for a couple 100 years, and then Louis leaves him.
Okay.
And that's all I knew. But so when I was watching the series, I was like, oh, okay, this is different. Not that I didn't like it. But yeah, in the novels, no, not really.
Gotcha. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I think I knew that in the novels that they spent a couple 100 years together, but I didn't realize that it kind of glossed over it.
I think that's one of the part of the big difference between Louis as a character in the books and the movie versus Louis as a character in the series. There's a reason his relationship with Armand is a footnote in the book while they dive into it in the series, because Louis as a character, like you said, his arc is, agency and coming into his own and discovering who he is, especially as an immortal, which his relationship with Armand helps with. And in the books, I feel like Louis has less of an arc, at least not until several books down the line, as much as he is just grappling with self-loathing and not grappling very hard. I mean, he is, like was said before, comfortable with self-loathing. It's like, I hate myself and I would rather continue to hate myself. So anything that could get me out of hating myself, I don't want to engage with that.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like there's almost sort of a detachment in his language in the novel too, which I think also is a little bit hard to read because he doesn't feel super emotionally invested into things. He kind of just tells you, yeah, I felt this way, but you don't really feel it as strongly until you'll have like particular lines or moments where it kind of slips out.
Yeah, in the series, we get a Louis who discovers that he loves photography and like walking around the city and capturing these moments, and these are things that make him happy. If Louis in the books ever found that out about himself, he would immediately burn his camera and throw it away because he'd be like, I don't deserve this because it makes me happy.
Agreed. Absolutely agree.
Honestly, I think this is the reason that book Louis and movie Louis stayed with Lestat for so long, even admitting that he found that he did not love, or his love was not as strong, or just had a great dislike for Lestat, because being with a Lestat is a constant reminder of the monster he is and why he should hate himself, whereas series Louis was... I don't know. I'm not sure. I struggle finding a reason why series Louis stayed with Lestat for so long?
Oh, I think I get it. I mean, I think it is love. I think it's a toxic relationship and he's drawn to him. And I think there is real love between them, but I kind of view it as like a Bronte novel. In Charlotte and Emily Bronte's novels, a lot of times you have characters that are in a relationship and they feel so strongly together, but there's essentially an inequality between them. And with Lestat and Louis in the show, I mean, he's his creator. He's powerful. He's more powerful. And then also you add the race thing on top of it. And there's like fundamental inequality between these two characters. So I think that they're both in a point where they just can't be together, like they just can't work together because of that inequality. And so I think that part of it and part of what happens in those novels is that the characters have to have a period of separation to grow and so that they can come back together as equals. And I think that's what happened in the show.
I absolutely agree to that because that's kind of what happens in the books too. And if you're living forever, you've got plenty of time to do that. Because
I think that's the point. Yeah.
300 year ago Lestat is not the same, 600 current Lestat. It's completely different. Plus the world changes, views change.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I definitely understand that. I did want to touch back on the Vampire Armand real quick. So if you go back to the reason why they don't talk a lot in the novels of his relationship with Louis is because that's not the main relationship that Armand has. His main arc relationship is with Pandora. And so if you read the Vampire Armand, his novel, it does talk about Louis a bit, so there is a little bit more development there. But it mostly goes back to his history. By the way, Armand is like 14, 15 in the novels. Mm-hmm. He's a young boy. He's not the adult that we see in the book or in the movie or the adaptation series. Mm-hmm. So he's a younger younger.
Are you telling me he's not like hot Antonio Banderas?
If Antonio Banderas was 15, yes.
Son of a bitch.
But no, not hot, because there's no such thing as a hot 15-year-old.
Right, because, So, you learn more about him and his arc in that novel. And Louis is mentioned, but not as much as Pandora.
Tiffany, as someone who has dove as deep into the books as you have, how far are you hoping to see the series go, like the television series go, throughout the book series? And what character are you most excited to see that we haven't seen yet?
Good question. Okay, so there was a point in time where Anne stopped writing novels. And, well, she stopped writing the Vampire Chronicles. And she even announced, I'm done. There's no more. That's it. The last book I'm writing about Lestat is called Blood Canticle. That's it. And I was very sad. And that was in 2003. And then she came back after a very long hiatus, and she started writing The Prince Lestat. I do not want this series to touch Prince Lestat. Stop at Blood Canticle. Do not go past that. End it where she originally ended it. Because the next 3 novels that she wrote, just don't go there.
Aliens.
Just don't do it. And one of my favorite novels is actually called Blackwood Farm, and I would love to see Quentin Blackwood is who I would love to meet in the series. My first favorite novel is The Tale of the Body Thief, and that's coming. In fact, we've already met the main person. Spoilers. We've met the main person in the series. He's already made an appearance a couple times. So I'm excited to see how that plays out. In Tale of the Body
I was just about to ask you what your favorite was. Now I know.
When I was younger, I read The Tale of the Body Thief in 2 days. I just couldn't stop. And I was, how old was I when I first read these novels? I think I started when I was 13, 14, and I've just been reading them ever since. Yeah, Tale of the Body Thief I couldn't put down. So that's coming, because that's right after Queen of the Damned.
If Quentin Black is the character you're most excited about, who are you casting as Quentin Black?
Ooh.
So he is in Louisiana, so someone Creole. I don't know. I would have to research that one.
Fair enough.
But he's also not he doesn't play a very big role in like the main vampires that we all know and love. He's like a side character. But he has a whole novel with him and Lestat interacting, and it's just a really cool side adventure that Lestat has that I thoroughly enjoyed. So that was a cool one.
I'm personally waiting for Marius.
Marius is a really good one. They please, hopefully they make it better than Queen of the Dam's Marius.
Yeah, I was really disappointed with Marius in that movie.
Mhm.
I was disappointed in the movie, let's face it, but
Mhm.
I really liked Marius in the books, and then to have him be that,
Yeah.
it's like, come on, man.
I'm also so happy that in the adaptation series, they made Lestat's maker his actual maker. Marius is not Lestat's maker, and that's who they made it in Queen of the Damned.
hmm
So happy they got it right. So happy. They even gave him the tower and everything. It was wonderful.
I would love to see an entire episode of the series with no dialogue in it. That is just Marius doing what Marius does and keeping those who must be kept.
Yeah, a whole episode like that would be wonderful. Mm-hmm. Although there would be music, because Marius is that type of gentleman who would be playing music in the background.
It's nice of him.
Oh, speaking of music, the music in the series is so good.
Yes, it is. Have you heard
Go
the
ahead.
songs for the Vampire Lestat, the new ones coming out?
I've heard there's multiple. I've only heard the one when they first did the announcement. The long face.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That was good.
Mm.
Yeah, there's this scene in season 2, episode 1, when he is, he's saying that if she was the only one in the world, vampire in the world, she would be enough. That scene in the back of the vehicle or whatever we're in, and there's that moment when he's talking to her and the music just like swells, and then he looks over and he sees her and he sees his image of Lestat, and I think that's like probably the best shot in the series, but also just the music is just the score is just so excellently done and so excellently composed. I really enjoyed it.
And it matters. It definitely helps set that scene. It did a really good job with the music. And
I feel like we talked. Good. Sorry. Sorry.
That's part of Lestat's personality too. Is the music? He's got a huge background in music, especially with Nicholas, one of his first lovers. Like he played the violin, and that's what drew him to him. And music in novels for Lestat is huge. Like it's always been a constant theme for him. So the fact that they're doing him justice with that is wonderful.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like we talked a lot about Louis, but what do you think about the adaptation of Lestat and Claudia?
So Claudia is going to be a completely different entity because, again, Claudia in the books is 4 or 5. Like, you're just starting to get that personality as a young child. I really like what they did with Claudia in the adaptation. Like, they actually gave her personality. They gave her thoughts, feelings, beliefs. I think they did a really good job with her. Lestat, for the longest time, I absolutely loved Tom Cruise's adaptation. Tom Cruise really got the viciousness of Lestat, but the series adaptation is everything. Sam Reed is Lestat. Like, he is Lestat.
If Brad Pitt is book Louis, Sam Reed is book Lestat.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I think Sam Reed is amazing at performance. I do still really like Tom Cruise's Lestat, though. I really like both of them. I don't think I could really... I mean, I guess just with the length of time I'm with him, I like Sam Reed's a little bit better, but I do really like Tom Cruise's Lestat, too. And I think that you're right, the viciousness, the kind of like unhinged behavior is really there.
Yes.
And I think as much just to support my previous statement, I also really like Tom Cruise playing Lestat in the version of the character that he is playing, just as much as I like series Louis, and his name has just escaped me. And I don't want to say Louis Anderson again.
Jacob Anderson.
Jacob Anderson.
Jacob Anderson or Riley Ritchie. That's his like musical persona. His music is great. I loved his last album that he just put out.
But Jacob Anderson, I love the Louis that he plays. It's just not book Louis. And I love the Lestat that Tom Cruise plays. It's just not book Lestat. And so, like, you know, while the series does a more faithful adaptation of Lestat and the movie does a more faithful adaptation of Louis, I still like the way that, you know, the characters opposite them played their versions of that character.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. Like, Tom Cruise did a phenomenal job for that Louis that Lestat in that era. Like, that that Lestat in that time frame of his life, he did a very good job portraying that. But Sam Reed is hitting all the notes of Lestat and his evolution in the book so far. He's got him down, including the heartfelt reconnection between him and Louis. Like, that was not a thing in Interview with the Vampire. That didn't happen the way it could have. But in the series, holy crap, I cried.
I did too.
Yeah, like, oh my god. But in the book, it was definitely some lovey-dovey in the book, but in the movie, it didn't really capture that essence between them, because that Lestat was just all vicious, all cold-hearted. There wasn't too much love there. But Sam Reed's Lestat has both.
Yeah, speaking of that reunion, I think I saw an interview where they're talking about they weren't really sure how that scene was going to play out because they thought that they went a little bit too much with the emotional elements in that scene, that maybe they played it a little too on their chest. But I think I really liked that scene just because of that vulnerability. It felt genuine.
Yes, I agree. And that is Lestat and Louis' relationship. Like, 1 second they are vulnerable and lovey-dovey with each other, and then the next they're at each other's throats.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they did a really good job. And I also think it helps that Sam Reed and Jacob Anderson are, in real life, they're like really good friends. Like, they've had this bond with them that it just portrays on screen as well.
Before we get too far from this, Baron, I had interrupted you. Did you have a thought on this topic?
I can't even remember what I was going to say.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, so you said you had to think about who you would cast as Quentin. Are there any upcoming characters who you do know who you would cast?
No, but I'm also really liking that the characters are not well-known actors. I like that they're bringing in different faces and different works of art from not, A-class, B-class celebrities. I think it adds a different essence to it. It's kind of the same thing they did with the Mayfair Witches, that series. Really like that too. I'm also looking forward to the further they get with the Mayfair Witches and the further they get with the Vampire Chronicles, because in the books they intersect. So the characters do meet eventually. So I am looking forward to that happening, because I love Rowan. I'm not really big on female characters, mostly just because I can't see myself in them most of the time. But Rowan, I adored her in the Mayfair Witch Chronicles. So seeing what they're doing with that and bringing in all these other characters and not celebrities, but actors that I've not met, it puts a face to them that I'm not seeing as, oh, I've seen this character or I've seen this actor in this series, and so I'm not interchanging them together. I'm not seeing them as playing, Dr. Joe on that series while also playing, this character in the Mayfair Chronicles. So I like that it's new faces.
Yeah, I feel like that's always just a smart way to go for a lot of franchise adaptations, because I think it is really hard seeing a familiar face and associating. I mean, that's why Anne Rice didn't really see Tom Cruise as Lestat, because she was used to seeing him a certain way and thought he'd be better for Louis.
That is true. But then after seeing what he did for that character, which Tom Cruise hated, Interview with the Vampire, by the way, he hated that movie.
Oh, that's what I was going to say.
Mm-hmm.
I just remembered. I spite like Tom Cruise as Lestat because he hates that role. That's so funny that you said that, because that's exactly what I was going to say.
What a perfect characteristic of Lestat coming out right there. Perfect. All right. Good. You're still playing the character. Got it. But yeah, he was starting to get pretty famous during that time. And I don't think Brad Pitt was very famous at that time, but he got famous.
I think that movie is what made him famous. I think he was in that Joe Black movie, the Death movie.
Sure.
Oh yeah, I don't know the title, but I've scenes are coming up in my head as you mentioned it.
And he was in Thelma and Louise.
Oh yes, he was.
And he had done stuff like that, but I think this is one of the big ones where he actually acted. The one where he was deaf, he wasn't great in. I'll just say that.
He was a newbie.
Meet
but
Joe
yeah,
Black.
Not nice.
But yeah, Interview with the Vampire at its time, there were some big name actors. Now we know their names. Back then, they weren't super huge, but Tom Cruise was. He had already played in a couple other bigger roles. But yeah, she did not want him as that. But after she saw what he did for that role, she did like him after that. She was happy with his performance.
Well, let me just go ahead and tear up that question. Well, some people might ask why we're doing this as a geek culture podcast, and I have to say one of the things we love as geeks and nerds is a good adaptation, and I can't think of too many series that have this many decent adaptations of the material, because we have the book, we have the series, we have the movie, we have the graphic novel. And honestly, off the top of my head, I can't think of a series that has as many decent adaptations as Interview with the Vampire. How long?
And such a huge following.
Yeah. How long do you think you can see this going on? Because obviously the series is something new and something I did not expect to see with how much time we've had in between, the movie and the series. How long do you think Interview with the Vampire can last as a phenomenon?
I feel like it really depends on what the consumers, the viewers, the fans want to see. Because a lot of the Vampire Chronicles fans, they know Louis, Lestat, Armand, Marius. Those are 4 big names that, okay, they know of those because those characters have already been kind of explored. Claudia. But they don't know the background. So if those characters, if the fans want to know the background, hopefully that's what AMC will do. They'll give us those origin stories. So I mean, I hope they at least get to Blood and Gold, which is Marius's story. I hope they at least get to Marius and show the destructive ways that happen between him and Lestat and those who must be kept. I want to see that origin story. Like I said, they don't have to get to the alien part. That's quite all right. That's not. Don't. But I want to see them get to at least to the part where Lestat finds himself and he's comfortable with his role in his part of the vampire society, because he does get to that point. It does become a point where he's comfortable and he's like, okay, this is who I am. This is who you want me to be. Let's go with this. Because right now he's still in his bratty little, I'm going to do what I want ways. But it does get to a point where he matures. But I want to see that mature Lestat. That humble, mature, okay, I'm here for you, you're here for me, Lestat.
What adaptation do you think is next, and why is it the Broadway musical?
It's already been done.
Yes, isn't there a musical? Yeah.
Shit.
Yeah, it failed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was produced by Elton John. It was called The Vampire Lestat.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and it didn't do so well. But I feel like if it was brought back now, it perhaps could be better. Because now the Vampire Chronicles, where there already was a following, it's more now. It's more widely available. It's now on Netflix, where it was only on AMC.
Yeah.
So a lot more people have access to it. But I feel like perhaps it would be better. I feel like wrong time, wrong place.
Mm-hmm.
Let Lin-Manuel Miranda do it.
No,
absolutely not.
Just whoever bring him in.
Whoever did Beetlejuice, maybe? I don't know.
Oh, well.
It's in the right genre.
You're being serious, so I'm going to say probably no. But I mean, who knows? I mean, there are people who have done comedy stuff and have went on to do like very dramatic stuff.
Yeah.
And have been. I mean, look at Jordan Peele, for God's sakes.
That's
true.
So,
I mean, why not?
Maybe Jordan Peele and Andrew Lloyd Webber. How about we get those two together? And we can do something there.
There you go.
That'd be. Yeah. You know what? I don't care what they do. Just do something.
Yeah, if those two get together, I'm watching it. I don't care what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Let's do that.
All right, Caitlin and our other podcasters, feel free to answer this question as well. But Caitlin, between your episode on your podcast and this episode on our podcast, is there anything else about Interview with a Vampire that you would like our listeners to know that we have not yet covered, or any opinions that have changed from that episode to this episode?
I don't think that my opinion of the movie adaptation has changed. I think I enjoy it in the way that this is a fun vampire movie, but the series for me has definitely taken a place because of how it's written. where it really is becoming one of my favorite television series in general. I think that it's the best piece of writing I've seen that tackles the idea of an unreliable narrator in such a way that's masterful. I really don't think I've seen many other pieces of media that has been able to tackle that, right? Because usually it's something that if you see it in a piece of literature, usually when it comes to the adaptation, they kind of ignore that. It's kind of hard to do that in a way visually, I think, on screen. So the way that this series managed to do that, and then coupled with some really good written dialogue and good acting to couple with it, I think that I just think that this show is just masterful screenwriting.
I think whatever Tiffany might have to wrap this up might be hard to follow. So, Baron, do you have any final thoughts?
Except for, it's like, I know that I have said that I haven't finished this series. However, I think that I'm excited to see where this keeps going. I'm excited to finish it out. It is by far my favorite adaptation, like I've said, which is not saying anything about the books or the movie. But I would say that if anybody wants to get in, especially it being spooky month, if you want to get in some good stuff to watch, please watch this TV series because it needs all the viewers it can to keep on going.
It's now on AMC Plus and Netflix. Or, be a pirate about it. Tiffany, any final thoughts?
I am so proud of the writers of the adaptation. Just like Caitlin said, they're doing a phenomenal job with it. I feel like they read the books, which is great. Because I can see aspects of the book in their writing, and I think they're doing a phenomenal job. I think Anne would be so proud of what they've accomplished, and I'm. It's heartbreaking to know that she'll never see it, at least not in physical form. But I think they're doing her. I think they're doing her proud. I think that they are doing a phenomenal job. I'm very excited to see where it's going, and I hope it goes for as long as it can. But I agree, absolutely. If you're into vampires and it's not Twilighty, read the books, watch the series, even watch Interview with the Vampire, the movie. You can skip Queen of the Damned, but if you want a good laugh after you've read the Queen of the Damned book, go ahead and watch it.
Also, soundtrack.
Yes, 100. I still listen to that soundtrack.
Same.
I will say, Anne doesn't even claim the Queen of the Damned movie. So if that tells you anything, there's that.
Except the soundtrack. She claims the soundtrack.
Yes, she absolutely claimed that soundtrack. Did we mention the soundtrack is really good? So you should probably listen to it.
You know what? Just listen to the soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
Skip the movie, listen to the soundtrack. All right, yeah, that
Agreed.
works.
Just download it or buy it. Good luck finding it. It's out there. But other than that, it's become such a huge part of my life, and I absolutely adore it. Highly recommend it to anyone who is ever interested in just delving into the vampire world. Read Interview with the Vampire. Just try it.
Okay. Email us at castersguild@gmail.com. Let us know who you would cast as Akasha, the Queen of the Damned, in the
leave it alone.
Series.
Let someone else do it. Don't take the heat for that.
You can't top Aaliyah. You can't. She did. No.
I would love to, though.
Join us on the Discord.
I'm glad you said it because that's exactly what I thought in my head.
You gonna get bit.
Hey, that's what he's going for. Join us on the Discord. That's where all the fun stuff is happening. And we will see you in the next one. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
See you later. Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.